Look at their faces, Luca. Every person in this room just watched your own father choose the woman you threw away like she was nothing. I said it quietly, almost to myself, as I watched my ex-husband's champagne glass slip from his fingers and shatter against the marble floor. I didn't need to shout it. His face already said everything for me. Every head in that ballroom turned toward me. And beside me, the man whose arm I was holding, the man who used to be my father-in-law and was now my husband, smiled the way a person smiles when they've been waiting a very long time for a moment exactly like this one. "Papa," Luca whispered, his voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. "What is this?" Alessandro didn't blink. "This," he said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "is my wife." Before I tell you how I ended up in that ballroom on that man's arm watching my ex-husband's whole world collapse in real time, if you're watching this, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And please subscribe and like this video. It helps me keep telling stories like mine. Now let me take you back to the beginning, because none of this happened the way you'd expect. Say it again, Luca. Say her name again so I know I'm not imagining this. My voice was shaking but my eyes were steady. I remember that clearly because it was the first time in 3 years of marriage that I had ever raised my voice at him. He didn't even look up from his phone. "Elena, you're being paranoid. There's no one. I already told you." "Then why do you leave at midnight and come home at 4 in the morning smelling like her perfume?" My hands were shaking by then. I had spent years being the patient wife, the understanding wife, the wife who didn't ask too many questions. That night I couldn't do it anymore. "You don't know what you're talking about," he snapped, finally looking at me. His eyes were cold. Not like the eyes I fell in love with. "I understand enough," I told him. "I understand you've stopped loving me." That was the night everything cracked open. But if I'm going to tell you this story properly, I have to go back further. Back to when I was just a young woman from a modest family, and Luca Moretti was the golden heir to one of the most powerful families in the city. I didn't grow up around marble floors and bodyguards. My father owned a small bakery. My mother taught piano to neighborhood kids. I met Luca at a charity dinner when I was 24, working as an event coordinator for the very foundation that would one day host the gala that changed my life twice over. Luca was handsome, confident, impossible to ignore. He wasn't like the other wealthy men I'd met at those events. He asked me real questions. He listened, or at least back then I believed he was listening. "You're not like the women my father wants me to marry," he told me once early on. "They only care about status. You care about people." I smiled when he said that. I thought I'd found something rare. I didn't know yet what family I was marrying into. That the foundation, the galas, the smiling photographs, all of it sat on top of something much darker. I learned slowly. A whispered phone call here. Men who came to the house and never gave their last names there. By the time I understood exactly what I had married into, I already loved him too much to walk away. Alessandro, Luca's father, was 54 when I married his son, still sharp, still strong, the kind of man who filled a room without ever raising his voice. He was quiet at family dinners, always watching, always thinking. But when he spoke, everyone listened, including Luca. From the very first time we met, I noticed something in him soften around me. I didn't understand it then. He told me once at a family dinner 2 years into my marriage, "You remind me of someone I lost a long time ago." "Your wife?" I asked gently. He nodded, his eyes somewhere far away. "She never asked for anything. She only wanted to be seen. Truly seen. Most people in this family forgot how to do that a long time ago." I didn't know then how much those words would come to mean to both of us. What I didn't fully understand at the time was how alone Alessandro really was. He'd buried his wife young, raised Luca mostly on his own between meetings and men who never gave their last names, and built an empire so large that everyone around him had learned to see the title before they saw the man. He didn't talk about any of that. He didn't have to. I could see it in the way he sat a little too still at the head of the table, like a man used to eating dinner in a room full of people who were all, in one way or another, afraid of him. Meanwhile, my marriage kept getting worse. I was right to suspect what I suspected. Luca had reconnected with a woman from his past, Camilla Rinaldi. She'd been his girlfriend before me years before until she left him for someone else and broke something in his pride that never fully healed. When she came back into his life, wealthier, more glamorous, seemingly sorry for the past, his old wounds tore right back open. He started meeting her in secret, telling himself it was nothing, telling himself it was just old friends catching up. It wasn't. My friend Grace saw it before I let myself see it. Elena, I've watched the way he looks at his phone at dinner. Something is wrong. He says it's business. I told her, though I didn't believe it even as I said it. Business doesn't make a man smile like that, she said. Talk to him. Really talk to him before it's too late. I'm scared, Grace. I'm scared if I push too hard I'll lose him completely. She took my hand. And if you don't push at all you'll lose yourself completely. He was right. But like a lot of women who love someone more than they love the truth, I waited. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself he'd come back to me the way he always did after one of his silent, moody weeks. I called that patience. It wasn't. It was fear wearing patience like a mask. 8 months later came the confrontation that ended everything. I saw you, Luca, I said that night, standing in the doorway of his study, my voice shaking. I saw you with her outside the restaurant. You were holding her hand. His jaw tightened. You're spying on me now? I didn't have to spy. Everyone in this city has eyes. Everyone talks. Then everyone should mind their own business, he growled, standing up so fast his chair nearly toppled. Is she the reason you've been so distant? The reason you can't even look at me? Don't do this, he warned. Don't push me. I'm your wife. I deserve to know the truth. That's when he snapped. He crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed my arm so hard I gasped. His other hand rose. Not quite a fist, but close enough that for one terrifying second I thought he might actually hit me. He caught himself just in time. His chest was heaving. His eyes were wild in a way I'd never seen before, not once in 6 years. Get out of my sight, he said, his voice shaking. Just get out. I spent the whole night crying in the guest room, too afraid to sleep in the same bed as a man I no longer recognized. I kept waiting for him to knock on the door and apologize. He never came. The next morning he walked into the kitchen where I sat hollow-eyed and exhausted, and dropped a thick envelope on the table in front of me. What is this? I asked, though some part of me already knew. Divorce papers, he said flatly. My lawyer will handle everything. You'll be taken care of financially. I just need your signature. I stared at him, waiting for some flicker of regret. There wasn't any. That's it. I whispered. After everything, that's all you have to say to me? There's nothing left to say, Elena. This marriage is over. What I didn't know that morning, what I only learned much later, was that Alessandro had been standing just outside the kitchen door. He'd come early for a business meeting with his son and he heard everything. The argument the night before. The cold, dismissive way his son ended 6 years of marriage like he was closing a business deal. He told me later he said nothing that day. He just watched his son walk out without even looking back at the woman crying at the kitchen table. And in that moment he told me something in him changed permanently, how he saw his own child. He'd spent years trying to guide Luca. Trying to teach him that power without respect is worthless, that loyalty matters more than pride. Luca never listened. He believed strength meant never bending, never apologizing, never showing weakness. Alessandro had hoped marrying a woman like me might soften those edges in his son. Instead, Luca threw away the one good thing in his life without blinking. After the divorce, I was completely alone. My marriage had swallowed most of my old friendships. The Moretti name made people either fear me or try to use me. Grace was really all I had left, and even she had her own life, her own children, only so much time to give me. It was during that lonely stretch that Alessandro reached out to me. I heard you moved into a smaller apartment, he said one afternoon, over coffee at a quiet cafe far from the family estate. Is everything all right? Financially, I mean. I didn't expect to hear from you, I admitted. Not after everything. Why not? You did nothing wrong. Your son might disagree. My son, he said carefully, was wrong. About many things. I studied him for a long moment. Why are you here, Alessandro? Because I wanted to make sure you were all right. That's all. It wasn't all. Neither of us understood that yet. Our meetings became more frequent over the following months. What started as simple check-ins became long conversations over coffee, then dinner, then walks through the city at night when neither of us could sleep. He told me things he said he'd never told another living soul. About his late wife, about the loneliness of running a family that lived in both light and shadow, about how tired he was of being surrounded by people who feared him but never actually knew him. You're the only person who talks to me like I'm just a man, he admitted one evening. Not a boss. Not a legend. Just a man. Maybe because that's all I ever wanted to see, I told him. Luca never understood that about you. He wanted a wife who would admire the empire. You only ever wanted someone who would sit with you at the end of a long day. My eyes filled with tears when he said that. I wanted that so badly. And he never gave it to me. He reached across the table and took my hand. Neither of us spoke for a long time after that. We didn't need to. I'm sorry for what my son did to you, he said finally. I'm sorry it took me this long to see how much you were suffering. You're here now, I whispered. I am. And I don't intend to leave. The more time we spent together, the more I realized how much of Alessandro the world never got to see. Men like him weren't supposed to laugh easily or admit they were wrong, or sit quietly for an hour just listening. But he did with me. Somewhere in all those long dinners and late walks, what started as friendship became something neither of us could keep pretending it wasn't. I never expected to feel this again, he admitted one night, sitting beside me on the balcony of his estate, the city spread out below us in a wash of light. I've spent so many years telling myself this part of my life was finished. Feel what? I asked, though I already knew. Alive, he said simply. You make me feel alive, Elena. Like a man again, not just a name people whisper. I didn't pull away when he reached for my hand. I didn't pull away when he leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to stop him. I didn't want to stop him. We kept our relationship hidden from the rest of the family for nearly a year. He knew exactly what kind of scandal it would cause. His own son's ex-wife, now his companion, maybe more. He knew how Luca would react, how the extended family would whisper and judge. But for the first time in years he told me he'd found something worth risking his reputation for. Marry me, he said one quiet evening. No elaborate proposal, no grand gesture. Just an honest question from a man who had spent his whole life being certain about everything except this. My eyes filled with tears. Alessandro, do you understand what this would mean? The family. Luca. Everyone will. I understand exactly what it means, he said gently. It means I finally get to build something with someone who never wanted my money or my name. Someone who reminds me every single day what it means to be loved for who I am, not what I own. I love you, I said, and the words surprised even me with how true they felt. I didn't expect to. But I do. Then say yes. I said yes. We married quietly 3 months later in a small chapel outside the city, with only his most trusted lawyer and my friend Grace as witnesses. Nothing like the wedding I'd had with Luca years before. No cameras. No hundreds of guests. No political alliances dressed up as celebration. Just two people who had found each other again, choosing to build something honest out of the wreckage of what came before. We'll need to tell the family eventually, I said afterward, worry pulling at me. We will, he agreed. When the time is right. The time came sooner than either of us expected, at the Moretti Foundation Gala. The same event I'd once helped plan years before, back when I still worked in event coordination, long before I ever imagined the Moretti name would become mine, not once but twice. By then Luca had already moved on, or thought he had. Confident and full of pride after our divorce was finalized, he started seeing Camilla Rinaldi almost right away. She'd spent years resenting the fact he moved on from her originally, and the moment she heard I was out of the picture, she saw her opening. Within months, she announced she was pregnant. "It's yours, Luca," she told him, tears in her eyes. Tears I later learned were far more calculated than genuine. "I know the timing is complicated, but I need you to know this baby is yours." He embraced the news eagerly. I understand why now. He was desperate for something to fill the space I'd left, even if he'd never admit that space existed. A baby would prove to everyone, especially his father, that he was thriving after the divorce. What Luca didn't know was that Camilla had never fully ended things with a previous lover, a man named Dante Costa. Dante had once promised her the world before disappearing when things got complicated between them. He resurfaced right around the same time Camilla went back to Luca, and their relationship, far from over, simply went underground. The baby was his. Camilla knew it with certainty, even as she buried that truth under careful lies, betting no one would ever question a story told with enough confidence. She nearly got away with it. The night of the gala arrived with all the grandeur that family was known for: crystal chandeliers, string quartets. The entire upper crust of the city gathered under golden light to celebrate another year of the foundation's charitable work. Luca arrived with Camilla on his arm, her pregnancy visibly showing, both of them smiling for the cameras like nothing in their lives was built on a lie. He had no idea his own father had a surprise waiting that would eclipse everything happening in his own life. Alessandro had insisted on this gala for the announcement. "The whole family will be there," he told me as we got dressed that evening. "Better they hear it from us directly than through whispers." "Are you sure about this?" I asked, adjusting the sleeve of my navy gown, my hands trembling. "Luca will be there. With Camilla." "I'm aware," he said calmly, though something dark flickered behind his eyes. "Are you ready?" I looked at myself in the mirror. A woman who'd been broken and put back together, who'd learned the hard way that love without respect means nothing, and that sometimes the very people who hurt you clear the path for someone who never should have let you go in the first place. "I'm ready," I said. We arrived fashionably late, though Alessandro would tell you it wasn't about theater, just about making an entrance worthy of what we were about to say. The moment those golden doors opened and I walked in on his arm, the entire ballroom seemed to freeze. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Every eye turned toward me, in navy silk, my hair swept back, diamonds at my throat that Alessandro had given me, standing beside the family patriarch himself. I watched Luca's face go white. I watched the champagne glass slip out of his hand and shatter against the marble. "Elena," he whispered. Camilla's grip on his arm tightened. "Luca, what is she doing here? Why is she with your father?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. He just watched, frozen, as I walked deeper into the room, my hand resting comfortably on his father's arm. Alessandro guided me toward the center of the ballroom, where the board members and the city's most influential guests had gathered. He raised his glass and the murmurs quieted. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. "This foundation has always been about family, community, and second chances. Tonight I have some personal news to share." I saw Luca's stomach drop. Some part of him already knew what was coming. 6 months ago, Alessandro continued, I married the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. Please join me in welcoming my wife, Elena Moretti. The room erupted into whispers. Someone gasped. A camera flashed, catching the shock on dozens of faces at once. Luca stepped forward, his face twisted with disbelief. "Papa, what is this?" "Elena is my ex-wife." "How could you?" "Your ex-wife," Alessandro said, cutting him off, "who you discarded without a shred of respect. Who you humiliated with lawyers and paperwork instead of facing your own failures like a man. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Alessandro said. "I was there, Luca. I heard everything that morning. I watched you throw divorce papers at a woman who loved you more than you ever deserved. The whole ballroom had gone silent, watching the Moretti family come undone in real time. This is a betrayal, Luca shouted. My own father. My own wife. She was never stolen from you, Alessandro said quietly, though it cut sharper than any shout could have. You threw her away, Luca. And now you're going to watch me love her the way you never could. I watched Luca's face drain of color completely. He turned to Camilla, maybe looking for some comfort in the wreckage, and instead found her staring past him, her own face going pale as she spotted someone walking in through the side entrance. A man in a dark gray suit, jaw tight, was heading straight for them. Camilla, Dante Costa said loud enough for people nearby to hear. We need to talk. Now. Dante, what are you doing here? She hissed, trying to pull him aside. You can't be here. I told you I wasn't going to disappear again, he said, not caring who heard him. Not while you're carrying my child and parading around with him like nothing happened. I remember the silence that followed that sentence better than almost anything else that night. Luca turned slowly toward Camilla. What did he just say? Luca, it's not what it sounds like, she stammered. What did he just say, Camilla? Dante stepped forward. The baby is mine, Luca. It's always been mine. She's known from the start. The room, already reeling from Alessandro's announcement, dissolved into complete chaos. I heard someone actually laugh before catching themselves. Cameras kept flashing, capturing every second of it. Tell me he's lying, Luca said, grabbing her arm, his voice shaking. Tell me right now he's lying. Her eyes filled with tears, genuine or not I couldn't say. Luca, I'm sorry. I panicked. I thought if you believed the baby was yours, everything would work out. You lied to me, he said, barely above a whisper now, all the fight gone out of him. For months, you let me believe I was going to be a father. I love you, Luca. That part was never a lie. Get away from me, he said, stepping back like she'd struck him. Get out of my sight. Both of you. Dante wrapped his arm around her and guided her toward the exit, the crowd parting around them, whispers trailing behind every step. She didn't look back. Luca stood alone in the middle of that ballroom. His mistress gone, his unborn child revealed to belong to another man, his father publicly married to the very woman he'd thrown away without a second thought. Every eye in that room was on him, some with pity, most with the particular satisfaction people feel watching the powerful fall. He turned to look at me. Elena, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't know about any of this. About Camilla. About. You didn't know because you never asked the right questions, Luca. I told him quietly but not unkindly. You never asked them of her and you never asked them of me either. I made a mistake, he said, his pride finally cracking. A terrible mistake. Yes, I said simply. You did. Is there any chance? No, I said, cutting him off before he could finish a question neither of us needed spoken aloud. There isn't, Luca. I found something with your father I never found with you. Peace. Respect. Someone who actually sees me. Alessandro put a steady hand on my shoulder. I saw the anger in his eyes soften into something closer to disappointment, and underneath that, a father's lingering hope that maybe even now, some lesson would finally take root in his son. Son, he said quietly just for Luca to hear. I did this because I love you, believe it or not. Sometimes a man has to lose everything before he understands what actually mattered. When you're ready to be honest with yourself, my door is still open. Luca said nothing. He just stood there, surrounded by whispers and flashing cameras, watching his father and his ex-wife standing together as husband and wife, watching the wreckage of his own pride scattered across that ballroom floor like the glass from his shattered champagne flute. The gala limped on around us after that. Guests unsure whether to leave or stay, whether to offer condolences or congratulations, whether what they just witnessed was something you talked about openly or pretended never happened. The board members huddled near the bar, already calculating what this meant for next year's donations. Grace found me a few minutes later standing near the balcony doors looking out over the city lights. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. "I think so," I told her, surprised by how true it felt. "For the first time in a long time, I think I actually am." That took courage tonight. Walking in there, knowing what would happen. "Alessandro gave me the courage," I said, glancing back at my husband, calm and steady even in the middle of the chaos he just caused. "He taught me the truth, however painful, is always better than pretending." Later that night, once the gala wound down and the guests filtered out into the cool evening air, Alessandro found me on the terrace, away from the last of the whispers still trailing through the estate like smoke. "Dance with me," he said, holding out his hand. "Now. After everything that just happened. Especially after everything that just happened," he said, a slow smile crossing his face. "I've spent my whole life letting other people decide when I was allowed to be happy. Tonight I decide." I laughed. A real laugh, the kind I hadn't let myself have in years, and took his hand. The string quartet had long since packed up, so there was no music at all, just the two of us swaying slowly under the terrace lights, the city glittering below us, the scandal still spreading through the ballroom behind us like a fire we no longer needed to put out. "Everyone in that room will be talking about tonight for years," I said, resting my head against his chest. "Let them talk," Alessandro said. "I spent 54 years building a name people were afraid of. I'd rather spend whatever years I have left building one they simply respect. Starting with you. And Luca? Luca will either learn from this or he won't," he said, his voice steady. "But that's his path to walk now, not mine to carry for him anymore." I looked up at him, and for the first time since I could remember, I didn't feel like the woman who'd been left behind, or the woman standing in someone else's shadow. I felt simply like myself, fully seen, finally chosen, exactly the way he'd promised. "Happy?" he asked quietly. "Happier than I've ever been," I told him, and I meant every word. He kissed my forehead, and we stood there a while longer, two people who had found each other in the wreckage of a family that almost broke us both, now standing at the center of it, unshaken. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Moretti," he murmured against my hair. "Officially this time. If you made it to the end of my story, tell me in the comments what you learned from it. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. I'll see you in the next story.